So, I'm Tana,
I'm Bruce.
and we just want to get into it. So, one of the things that you need to know about me, really about us, but this story is from my earlier childhood, well, my teenagehood, and that is that I am a farm girl, but not just a farm girl. I grew up farming with draft horses and milking cows and harnessing teams and driving farm equipment and riding horses and growing our own vegetables and even eating our friends that we had on the farm in the form of chickens and pigs and turkeys, which for the record is why I am not still a farm girl. I can't handle the carnage. I don't like noshing on my friends. So I want to share a story with you, and then we just want to have a discussion about spiritual wisdom pieces that maybe we can extrapolate from it. So this story is about one of our draft horses. His name was Duke. He was a Suffolk, if anybody knows anything about different draft horse breeds. And he was massive, 1,800 pounds plus. At the withers, which is the shoulders, he stood taller than me, and I'm 5'6". His prints of his hooves on the ground, when I would step in them, were longer than my foot. The diameter of them was longer than my foot. He was like sitting on a table. I mean, his backbone, there was his backbone, and when you sat on him, 2 inches above his backbone on either side was the big, massive back muscles. And your legs just shot out like a table and then tried to drop down on the sides. He was a tank. He was so impressive. And he was so serious. I mean, his best friend, Buck, they were a team. It was just the opposite. He was like a California, lean, lanky, still a draft horse, but totally chill, totally laid back. And Duke was just as intense as a big boy can be. Well, let's juxtaposition right here for a little minute to share with you that you had all the normal animals that one would have on a small farm. But one year we got a goat. We had never had goats before. And oh my goodness, I loved my goat. Her name was Autumn. And talk about mischievous, my goodness. You would just be walking along and all of a sudden you're flying through the air because she has just come up behind you and butted you, which helped save energy when one was on a long walk, but it wasn't, it was a little disconcerting. I'm just going to say that from time to time. But she was a typical goat. Things you hear about them that they'll eat whatever, it's true. And that they are totally mischievous, it's true. For instance, one day my big brother, had come home to our farm to visit, and he brought his beautiful new Grand Prix, which back in the day was a bit of a boat compared to what we drive now, but super cool then. And he and I went out to get something out of his car one day, and there was my goat standing on the hood, and there were little hoof prints going across the trunk, up on the roof, across that, down onto the hood where she was currently standing. And I thought my brother was going to explode because he was trying to figure out what to do, because he was afraid that if he lunged at her, her little flying hooves would damage his car even more. And he just stood there frozen, and she just looked at him, chewing her cud. All was well in her world. And finally, she just hopped down off the car and trotted off. And I thought we were going to have to hospitalize my brother. But that's how it was living with Autumn. She was just a riot. I loved her. I loved her so much. But the story that I wanted to share with you is about one spring morning. So in the spring, if you've ever lived on a small farm, it is a busy, busy time. And you're plowing fields and you're harrowing and you're getting, ready for planting and all that good stuff. So what that meant for our team of draft horses was that they had a lot of long, hot, sweaty days ahead of them. And so my dad would go out at dark 30, that's what we called it, in the morning before the sun was up. And he'd get the horses out of the corral and he would take them up to the tack shed where we kept the harnesses and the saddles and all that good stuff. And we had some posts there and we'd tie them up. We would harness them, all but the bridle, and leave them with some oats to chew and enjoy before they started their long day. And so he was down, well, he ate his breakfast. So he was down eating his breakfast, and I just popped out to see the horses before their day began. And it was still dark. The sun had not broken the horizon yet. And you know how in the spring there's just that beautiful smell of emerging life and just coolness in the morning air and the colors before the sun peaks up and saturates everything with light. They're just dark and muted and velvety and beautiful and kind of hard to see things in. And so I'm walking up towards the horses and I glance over and I see this figure that my brain can't really comprehend. And I realize that Duke has been tied up at the cow manger that's just across the little way there, enjoying his oats. And so I walked closer towards him, trying to figure out what it was I was seeing that I didn't understand. And just then the sun breached the horizon and boof, the lights were turned on, the proverbial lights. The switch had been thrown and everything was clearly visible in that moment. And there, perched atop Duke, was my goat standing on his back. And I was like, what? Oh, how did she get up there? And then I realized that that's easy for a goat. There's a manger. She could hop up on that and then hop on his back. And I thought to myself, how in the world is Duke letting her be there? But then I realized that Duke had a lot of powerful ways he could get her off of him if he divest her of her perch, if he really, really wanted to. But they were both just standing there. Duke was chewing his oats and Autumn was looking out at that gorgeous desert sunrise. And I don't know, I just felt some things shift inside of myself in that moment, and some lessons began to germinate inside of me that I wanted us to go ahead and talk about. So, Bruce, what do you think?
Well, first off, I remember Duke pretty well. And when the little kids rode him, your feet just went out to either side of him.
Yes.
They didn't even start going down.
They didn't even bend.
They just went out.
No.
He
Yes.
just did the splits while you were riding him because he was massive. Just
He was a straight up
beautiful
table.
horses. Oh yeah, and just beautiful horses. And I am also just still having the fact that the goat got up there even.
I know, right? Wow. I mean, it's one thing to hop on top of a car, but you hop on top of a massive animal and just say, yeah, this is where I'm
Yeah.
standing right now. That was
And Duke's
crazy.
just chill about it, eating his oats.
Duke was just chill. I don't know. Maybe those little hooves feel good on his big old muscles. I don't know.
Little shiatsu.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's definitely the things that we talked about with the shoulders that we stand on. It's just very symbolic of how we might even feel at times. Not quite worthy of the shoulders we're standing on.
For sure. For sure. And I think it takes some courage, actually. It takes some kind of chutzpah inside of oneself to be willing to take that leap to a place that seems really unlikely just so that you can watch a new day dawn. In our lives, we're striving to do that same thing, really, right? We all have goals, we have directions, we have things we would like to have happen. And it takes courage and goat-ish chutzpah to be willing to jump up on the back of a massive draft horse and say, yeah, I think this will work. This will be the right place to be. That's kind of crazy.
The thing we were talking about is not just having a better view by where we stand on, but also thinking about the shoulders that we stand on. And I think there's a couple different levels of shoulders that we stand on. One of the first things that I think comes to mind is parents and maybe generations that have gone before us. And they might not always be we're just pulling up a picture here. They might not always be these big, strong shoulders that we're thinking of. A lot of times they can just be shoulders that maybe we take for granted and maybe seem like they've had more than their fair share of years. But they're
Yeah.
still a high place to stand from. And the other side of that, I guess, is it's not always someplace we want to be standing. Sometimes in our lives, they're not something that we're immediately grateful for because of how we got there or how we were treated or whatever the case may be. Because it's not always just a beautiful morning on the desert to be standing on wherever we're at.
Exactly. Exactly. It's not always ideal, right?
Yes.
I think that some of these connections that we make in terms of shoulders to stand on can be very disparate. They can seem super wrong. And the truth can be about that they can actually turn out to be exactly what we need. And I think that requires a spiritual ability to have a different perspective to see things from, and to develop some tools to make a not lovely shoulder that we're standing on work out to be exactly what we need. And sometimes we just need time. Sometimes we just need to be able to look back and see that, oh, you know what? That was what I needed. Even though it was hard, even though it was painful, even though it didn't feel right, even though it didn't feel fair, it didn't feel just, it actually did boost me up to a new day in a new way.
I think there's been a few times in my life where I've been very narrow focused and have had things come up in my life. One specific was a school quiz bowl thing it was like Constitution quiz bowl. And
Yeah.
at that time in my life, I was on the wrestling team and a couple other things, and it just seemed more of a sidetrack. I was just like, I'm not looking to do constitutional whatever, because I didn't even really know that much about the Constitution, and it ended up being one of the funnest things I did in school. It was
Oh,
really
wow.
fun, and I learned so much and
Brilliant.
got a real appreciation for the Constitution of the United States in ways that I don't think I ever would have learned anyways. But I think there's been quite a few times in my life where the thing that ended up being the biggest factor of that time, or one of the funnest things I did, was something that I just was like, you want me to go do what?
Right. So happy day, my headset, its battery died. And so now I have these lovely ones with wires. But here we are back again in our discussion. And I think that another thing that I learned from this story is that we very much need each other, and we need each other in new ways that we haven't thought of yet. I actually really love that idea because I love new thoughts. I love that sometimes we can get really stuck in our idea of how things should be and how things need to look and how things aren't being the way that we scripted for them to be. And actually want to invite us that maybe in those moments we can look again and find out that the script has actually been changed to do that very thing, to help us realize how we need each other in ways that we haven't thought of yet, awaken us and increase our understanding and create that meaning and purpose in our lives that we need. And to me, really, those are the spiritual aspects of our life. Those are the aspects that I want to say develop meaning that we're looking for, the reason to get up, the reason to keep going, the reason to be flexible and be willing to shift gears. It creates that peace that's bigger than ourselves and gives us a good reason for what we're going through and a way forward in all of it.
Yeah, I agree that we can set our sights on something and just be completely solid and rigid and only focus on ourselves and our own view, or we can be grateful for ending up in a random perch on the back of a horse.
Yes, right?
And
Exactly.
if you're just looking at your own spot and jumping up there, then you can actually be in that beautiful moment and be like, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to be on a horse, and just jump down.
Right?
Never even think about the fact that it's a pretty cool perch.
Exactly. And I think as people, we struggle, with those kinds of thought processes. And maybe we just need to be as spiritually wise as a goat and just go, hey, that's where I feel like I want to be and need to be, and just do it and just love it
Watch
and
the sunrise.
be in the moment, which thing I will own. I'm not that great at. I like to be about 7 miles down the road and struggle to be in the moment itself. But when I do manage it, my friends, when I do manage it, it's pretty delicious. I'm not going to lie.
Kind of the next section we were talking about is just the different levels that we have, that we are standing on, that we're growing from, and that can be perspectives for our growth spiritually or otherwise. Is the image that we were coming up with is, as you're climbing your ladder in life, even just not standing on somebody else's shoulders, but the shoulders of who we were before, we can get up a ladder and start disparaging ourselves back down the ladder and make those judgments of, why didn't I do that? Why could I not see that this was just an answer and it wasn't going to be that big a deal? All of those doubts and everything that we have that a lot of times attack us daily. And we can throw some pretty good sized rocks down at our former selves without taking time to think that at that level of the ladder, could I even see that answer? Because as we get up the ladder, there are many things that can change. We can see further in the distance. We might get out of a fog that we've been in. All of those kind of things, and all of those can add to how we judge and treat ourselves and even generations before that.
Absolutely. I look back at myself as a parent, right? So I have grandkids now, and my kids are adults. I have 5 kiddos. And I look back and say, I wish that I could have parented and raised them then, knowing what I know now, right? It would have been a whole different story. And I also understand about myself that I woke up every morning with a desire to do my best job. I wanted to do my best. That was my goal. And some days, I did pretty good. And other days, I royally sucked at it. And on those days, that literally was my best. I mean, I never got up in the morning and said, I just really don't care about my kids today. I'm just going to, do my worst. That was never a thing. So now when I look back at me then, I have more of a tendency to just say, oh, sweetie, A, I don't know how you got up and breathed through every day. Was pretty intense. And B, I get that you were doing your best. And honestly, I couldn't know what I know now if I didn't experience what I experienced then. So it's all serving a really great purpose. And we need to be kind to ourselves. And yes, I'm taking note and I'm listening to me as I say this also, because I don't always do that very well either. And sometimes I do it well. So I'm inviting us to be more gentle with ourselves. And as Bruce has pointed out, stop throwing rocks down the ladder. You cannot judge your light yesterday by your light today. It's just unjust.
Yeah, I think it's fair to you, to your previous self. And as we talked about, even the shoulders that we stand on, even those humble shoulders that have given what they could. And a lot of times we may not see the care, the thought that they had for us. And sometimes it might not have been there. But
Yeah.
we ended up where we are because of those circumstances. And there's really kind of two schools of thought. There's not just two things ever. There's always a scale. But you can either be upset that you landed on the shoulders that you did, or you can be grateful for a place to perch.
Yeah. And I think another thing that I've learned as I've, gone through my life up to this point is that as I have learned to give myself some grace, what it has shown me is that all the shoulders that I have stood on have been doing their level best as well. All they could stand on was the shoulders they were given. And I think that in general, and I know that this is a generality, and I do think that in general, people are trying to do their best.
Yeah. And when things are starting small, and I think a really good way to pick this is, and then one that I wanted to put in here anyways, is the start of our nation. And a lot of people on either side of how our nation was brought up and who did it and why and all of those kind of things. But I think a really important thing to remember is that when our nation started, there was no great vast root system or height of a ladder or anything. They were just at ground zero. There
Yeah.
was no nation yet even, and they were trying to build something that they thought would be better for those down the road. And as you said, that everybody who's trying to do their level best to push something down the road, I don't think it always remembers that I don't think it always matters that it was perfect, because they did what they did with the time they had and the energy they had and the vision that they had with what they could see. And sometimes that was an incredible jump, and sometimes it may just be one more layer in the strata, something that you can barely even see unless you cut it open and really look at it. But like you said, it rarely is somebody that just said, "This is what I want my life to be," is a complete and utter failure. Just
Right.
try and wipe myself from history. And there may be times when you feel like that, but in most people's eyes, they're the hero of their story, because that's what you got to be. And if you're not, that's someplace that you can change from.
Yeah.
Just start looking like your own hero.
I like that. And I feel like it's easy to stand on a ladder and judge, and we turn it into a ladder of judgment. I think it takes a more humble willingness to introspect, to find out the truth about ourselves, and that is that we are trying our best, and to then realize so is everybody else. So there's a quote, and it says, "This requires an understanding within that these vantage points," meaning those shoulders, "are sacred ground. They are accessed by alignment with spiritual laws. If they are approached with naked self-interest and greed, they can be weakened and may not support the weight of our self-involvement. On the other hand, a grateful heart, which acknowledges and honors the price paid for one's new footing, is poised to access the full power of it."
That's just a really deep statement. And when we were going through this, the thought that really kind of grabbed me and is just how gratitude becomes the thing that ties us down through all of those levels. If we're just this little leaf that's growing on the end of a branch, then all of the branches that came before us, the trunk, all the way down into the roots, we're tied to all of that. That is full measure of the shoulders that we stand on. And as that quote talks about, if we're not looking at where all of this came from, and we start to get to the point where either our pride tells us that we're too good to stand on these shoulders, or our desires for something completely different and
That we can do
radical
it without them.
change, or that we could do it without them. Yeah. That they cut us off. We no longer have those shoulders to stand on. And as you can see here, if we're a leaf out here and we cut ourselves off, the only place to go is down.
Yeah, we
And
die. Yeah.
yeah. So in our own lives, if we get feeling like we don't have a good ground to stand on, I really think that the answer is to start appreciating all the work that we have done in our lives, that those who came before us have done in their lives, and trying to show gratitude to all that came before us and for every moment that has put us where we're standing, and be grateful for the place to perch and not throw rocks down the ladder like we've been saying.
And I just want to say that I have really learned that gratitude is the great shifter. It shifts the energy, it shifts the reality, it shifts our experience, it shifts everything. And it's got to start inside of ourselves. And when we catch ourselves, with our saw out ready to cut the branch that we're growing on, or we're beating a shoulder that's below us, or we pick up rocks and are trying to throw them, then we can just notice that and say, "Oh my goodness, look what I'm doing." I need to shift that. And then seriously, it is a matter of conscious wrestle in your thoughts to just say, "No, I don't choose that." And to just require ourselves, force ourselves to start listing gratitudes, to start seeing a different way, having a different perspective. And gratitude is the way you do it. I've had many experiences with that. And again, I will own that sometimes I catch myself with a handful of rocks in my hand, ready to throw them, others and myself. And I say to myself, oh my goodness, Tana, look what you're doing. And I say, yes, nobody bug me, I'm going to. And I throw them. And there are other times when I catch myself with my handful of rocks, when I say, wow, look what you're ready to do. And I say, dang it, that's not what I choose. And then I have to put myself through the paces. I have to, I don't know, sing a song that makes me feel grateful or helps me feel grateful, or even list off things. Sometimes I'm really upset and I do it tongue in cheek and in a really snotty kind of way and be like, I'm grateful that the steering wheel in my car steers my wheels, whatever. Grateful that there are stupid lines on the stupid road so people don't drive in my way. I'm grateful that, and that's the way I start. And then if you can start, my friends, if you can start, it will evolve to a place that's much more soft-hearted, a place that's much more authentic, and a place that actually does house gratitude. And then the whole story has shifted inside of you. It's a really beautiful thing. It's pretty simple, not always easy, but pretty simple. So, do we have any other?
I just had to laugh that you went into that, because part of the thing that I keep thinking through all this is, all this great information, and there's all of these pedestals that you put information on in your life. But the reality is this is a very broken world.
Yes.
Those beautiful things
Full of
are
hurting
going to be
people.
shattered at one point in time, all kinds of different ways. We even had a comment on the last video that when we were talking about tools, the commented that even the tools sometimes can be the problem and not just
Yes, it
the
gets you
answer.
in trouble.
All I could think about was to the carpenter, everything's a nail and every answer is a hammer.
Yes, yes. That's why we have to learn new tools. Oh my goodness.
Sometimes you
true.
just got to put the hammer down and
Have a new perspective. There might be another way. There might be. And then as we find ourselves in those days on the ladder with a handful of rocks, to not start throwing rocks at ourselves for that, but to just realize, wow, I want to throw rocks today. What am I going to do about that?
Yeah.
And what if I do throw rocks anyway? Am I still a lovable, valuable, worthwhile person? And the answer to that, my friends, is unequivocally yes. And sometimes rocks will fly, and other times you'll catch yourself. And both are going to teach us so we can ultimately rejoice. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know that now's the time we say like and subscribe, but even more importantly, we'd like to say take the time right now to care for someone today, whether it's yourself or someone else. And remember that wisdom is knowing we need each other. Have a blessed day.